Elias Kane had lived on Vera Station for 3 years without drawing much attention. The orbital colony was a cluttered ring of alloy and old trade modules, patched together with more hope than engineering. He rented a narrow workshop tucked between a spice merchant stall and a shuttered hangar bay. To the locals, he was simply the human mechanic, a quiet man with steady hands and an instinct for coaxing life back into machines that others abandoned as scrap. He kept his head down, spoke little, and carried himself with the sort of discipline that marked soldiers long after they had left the battlefield. Most chose not to notice. Inside the workshop, the scent of lubricants and scorched metal clung to the walls. Elias's tools hung in meticulous order, gleaming under the sterile glow of overhead lamps. Every bolt and washer was stored with an almost obsessive neatness. His bench bore faint scratches from years of use, but never clutter. When one job ended, the space was cleared before another began. That ritual was not simply habit but necessity, an echo of training where disorder meant death. He had just reassembled the casing of a fractured power relay when the bell over the door chimed. A small figure entered, clutching a battered toy robot with one arm. The girl's eyes, a brilliant shade of turquoise common among the Veran people, fixed on Elias with hesitant hope. She could not have been more than 8. "My robot doesn't move anymore," she said, voice quavering with the fragile courage of children. "Can you fix him?" Elias set down his tools and studied the object. It was little more than a mass-produced trinket, one of countless playthings sold by traders passing through the sector. Its limbs were cracked, wiring frayed, and one optical sensor dangled loosely from its socket. Most would have thrown it away. "Put him on the bench," Elias said. His voice was gravelly, unused to conversation but not unkind. The girl obeyed, her small hands reluctant to release the toy. Elias inspected the damage, recognizing shortcuts in the manufacturer's design, the neglect of proper shielding, the brittle joints never meant to endure a child's affection. He fetched a fine soldering iron, the glow of its tip illuminating the deep lines etched into his face. "Will he walk again?" the girl whispered. "If I do my job right," Elias replied. She lingered near the bench, watching intently. Her presence was unusual. Most customers dropped their machines and left, content to return later. Yet Elias did not send her away. Instead, he worked in silence, letting her see the precision of his movements. His hands were steady, even when handling wires as thin as threads. He adjusted gears, reinforced joints, and replaced a tiny power cell from his personal stockpile. Minutes passed, punctuated only by the faint hiss of solder cooling. Elias remembered repairing combat drones under fire, patching circuitry with shaking fingers as explosions thundered outside the blast walls. Here, in this quiet workshop, the stakes were infinitely smaller, yet curiously heavier. The girl's hope pressed on him more fiercely than a commander's orders ever had. At last, he set down the iron and tapped the robot's chest plate. The machine shuddered, then its eyes flickered with pale light. It jerked upright on spindly legs, tottered, and began its clumsy march across the bench. The girl gasped, delight ringing through the dim room. "He's alive," she exclaimed, scooping the toy into her arms. The robot squealed in a cheerful tone, its programming restored. Elias gave a small nod. "Keep him away from water, and he'll last longer this time." The girl hugged the robot tight, then hesitated at the door. "Thank you, sir. What do I owe you?" "Nothing," Elias said. He had no need for a child's coin. She smiled, radiant and fleeting, before disappearing into the bustle of the station's corridor. Elias watched the door close, his expression unreadable. His eyes lingered not on the bench or the tools but on the scrap of plating he had used to reinforce the toy's torso. On it, he had unconsciously carved a small design, a falcon with wings outstretched. The symbol was etched into his memory, burned into his flesh in ink and scar, and no matter how many years had passed, his hand had traced it without thought. He realized only after the fact, and cursed himself softly. The emblem belonged to men who no longer existed. A unit disbanded in blood and silence. Here, on a child's toy, it was harmless, unless seen by the wrong eyes. Elias wiped the bench clean, as if erasing evidence, and forced his attention back to the power relay still waiting. Across the corridor, beyond the thin window of the workshop, a pair of figures loitered. One was Commander Drell, aide to Admiral Kale Vaynar, a man whose sharp gaze missed little. He had paused while escorting supplies through the district, and now his eyes narrowed on the toy clutched by the girl darting past. Drell caught the glint of a symbol scratched into the plating, familiar though long unseen. His breath stilled. The Falcon. His mind raced, connecting memory to rumor. The emblem of the Falcon Unit had been feared across campaigns where humans fought with unmatched ferocity. That unit had vanished decades ago, its soldiers believed dead or scattered. Yet here, on Vera Station, a simple toy bore their crest. Drell's jaw tightened. He turned without a word and strode toward the higher levels of the station, where Admiral Vaynar's command awaited. Elias Kane, intent on his work, did not see the man depart. He believed himself still hidden in plain sight, nothing more than a mechanic. But the Falcon had taken flight again, and its shadow was already spreading. "You said." Admiral Kale Vaynar studied the report with a frown etched deep across his angular features. Commander Drell stood at attention before him, his posture rigid, his tone precise as he recounted what he had seen in the lower district. The emblem, he insisted, was unmistakable. Kale leaned back in his chair, the hum of the station's command deck vibrating faintly beneath his boots. Decades of service had carved the Admiral into a man who trusted little but the evidence before his eyes, and yet the thought of a Falcon Unit survivor was enough to unsettle even him. Humans had been warriors unlike any others, unpredictable, inventive, and relentless. The Falcons, in particular, had been the sharp edge of that legend. "You are certain?" Kale's voice carried the weight of command, low and measured. "As certain as I can be, sir," Drell replied. The symbol was etched clearly, and the human in the workshop bore the manner of a soldier. His hands moved with discipline. "He hides it well, but the air around him is wrong for a tradesman." The Admiral considered this. He had fought long enough to recognize the residue of war in men's movements, the way they scanned rooms, the way silence never quite sat comfortably on their shoulders. If one of the Falcons had survived, it was not something to ignore. "Summon him," Kale ordered. When Elias Kane arrived, escorted by 2 guards, he carried himself without protest, though his eyes flicked once to the exits and again to the Admiral's hands, noting weapons, distance, terrain. Kale observed everything in that brief glance and found his suspicions confirmed. This was no ordinary mechanic. "Elias Kane," Kale began, testing the name as though tasting it. A human, living quietly on Vera Station, repairing toys and terminals. A modest life. He leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And yet one of your repairs bears the emblem of the Falcon Unit. Explain that." Elias did not flinch, though a muscle in his jaw tightened. "Old habit," he said flatly. "I fix machines. Sometimes I leave marks. Nothing more." Kale tapped his fingers against the desk, unimpressed. "I have met men of your kind before. Warriors who carried that bird on their shoulders. They were not mechanics." "I'm not one anymore," Elias replied. His voice was calm, but the weariness in it was heavy, the kind that spoke of long marches and graves dug in silence. The Admiral studied him, weighing the truth in that tone. Drell shifted uneasily, sensing the tension coil between them like a wire drawn taut. "Tell me," Kale said at last, "were you with them when they broke the siege at Karath Prime? Or when they burned the pirate stronghold at Jexer Ridge? I saw Falcons fight there. Men who moved like phantoms, who turned desperation into victory." Elias's eyes flickered, a shadow of memory crossing his face. He said nothing, but silence was answer enough. Kale leaned back, his voice dropping. "That unit was supposed to be gone. Yet here you stand. Why hide in this place, mending scraps for strangers?" "Because I'm finished," Elias said. His tone sharpened now, steel beneath the calm. "The Falcons are ashes. I bury the dead by living quietly. That's all I have left." The Admiral considered him carefully. He was not a man swayed by sentiment, yet He understood the ghosts that haunted soldiers. Still, he also understood the galaxy did not let old warriors rest for long. Trouble was stirring, and men like Elias Kane could not remain buried. There have been raids, Kale said, shifting the conversation with deliberate gravity. Pirates striking colonies on the fringe. Not common raiders, but coordinated groups with military precision. They disable defenses with knowledge they should not have. Some believe ex-human mercenaries are among them. Elias's eyes narrowed, though he kept his voice flat. Then you have soldiers to deal with them. My work is here. Do not mistake me, Kale said, rising to his feet. He stood tall, his presence commanding the room like a shadow falling across stone. I do not ask for your service. But the emblem you left, intentionally or not, has meaning. To those who remember, it signals a survivor. Survivors attract attention. And attention can be fatal. Elias felt the words settle like iron on his shoulders. He had worked for years to remain unseen, to bury the Falcon within him. But fate had a way of unearthing what men sought to hide. He kept his expression neutral, though inside a flicker of old instinct stirred, that restless anticipation of a fight he did not want. Then let them ignore me, he said. Kale stepped closer, his voice dropping to a murmur meant only for Elias. You know they won't. Pirates, mercenaries, old enemies, someone will come looking. The galaxy does not forgive legends. It hunts them. For a long moment, silence reigned. Elias's hand twitched once, as if to reach for a weapon that was not there, before he forced it still. He met the Admiral's eyes with a soldier's defiance, then inclined his head slightly, enough to end the exchange, without yielding. I am a mechanic, he said. That's all anyone needs to know. Kale studied him a final time, then turned away. Perhaps. For now. But remember, Elias Kane, when the storm comes, hiding will not keep you dry. The guards escorted him out, though Elias needed no guiding hand. His steps were steady, measured, but inside he carried the weight of a truth he could not deny. The falcons were gone, yet the shadow of their wings still clung to him. And now others had seen it. In the command chamber, Drell shifted uneasily. Do you believe him, sir? The Admiral's gaze lingered on the stars outside the viewport, where the trade lanes glittered like threads of silver across the void. I believe he wants peace, Kale said. But peace is rarely granted to men forged in war. The emblem has resurfaced, and that means the past is clawing its way back. He may refuse to fight, but the fight will come to him. Drell bowed his head, the tension unbroken. Beyond the glass, the endless dark waited, vast and silent, holding secrets and dangers alike. And somewhere in its depths, forces already stirred, drawn by the faint echo of a falcon's cry. You said. The first alarms wailed through Vera Station like the cries of wounded metal. Elias Kane was bent over a disassembled compressor when the sound cut through the workshop walls, shrill and merciless. He knew the tone immediately. Not a drill, not a malfunction, but a call to brace for assault. Outside, hurried footsteps pounded the corridor, shouts echoing as civilians scrambled toward shelters. He stepped to the doorway and saw the flashing red strips along the ceiling, the pulse of emergency lighting painting every face with dread. Ships had slipped past the outer sensors. The station's antiquated defense grid was already faltering. Elias felt the weight of choice pressing against his chest. He had told himself he was finished, yet the storm had come all the same. A thunderous impact shook the hull, followed by the faint reverberation of plasma fire. The pirates had latched onto the docking bays with brutal efficiency. Through the narrow viewport, Elias glimpsed their vessels, sleek scavenger craft refitted with stolen military hardware, bristling with cannons far too advanced for mere raiders. He saw the emblem of a jagged blade painted across their hulls, the mark of Captain Korvek, a mercenary whose name carried whispers of slaughtered colonies. The mechanic's first thought was of the child, Leary. He remembered the fragile hope in her eyes as he repaired her toy, and without hesitation, he moved into the crowd, pushing against the tide of terrified civilians. He found her near the stairwell, clutching the robot to her chest while others pulled at her arms in panic. Elias scooped her up without a word, guiding her and a handful of others toward the inner shelter. His presence steadied them, his calm voice cut through the chaos like a blade through cloth. But the pirates were already inside. The hiss of breached airlocks echoed down the halls, followed by the heavy tread of armored boots. Plasma bolts cracked against bulkheads, scorching metal and scattering refugees. Elias forced the civilians into the shelter and sealed the door, standing alone in the corridor as the first wave rounded the corner. He moved before they fired. A scavenged pipe wrench became a weapon in his hand, swung with brutal precision. The first pirate dropped, helmet caved in. Elias wrenched a sidearm from his grasp before the second could react. 3 shots rang out, each measured, each fatal. His body moved with muscle memory he had buried but never forgotten. Every strike was efficient, deliberate, no wasted motion. Admiral Kale Vaynar and his soldiers reached the lower levels moments later, only to find Elias standing over the fallen raiders, the pistol steady in his grip. For an instant, Kale saw not a mechanic but the echo of a soldier who had once carved fear into the galaxy. "Fall back to the plaza," Kale ordered his men, never taking his eyes off Elias. "They'll push harder. We'll need every fighter we have." Elias said nothing, but he fell in beside them. More pirates surged forward, their weapons tearing through the air in brilliant arcs of plasma. Kale's troops fired back, but discipline faltered. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and terrified. Then Elias moved among them, barking sharp commands that cut through panic. "Cover the flanks. 2, on the stairwell. Focus fire on the heavy trooper." His voice carried authority born from blood and battle, and the soldiers obeyed instinctively. The tide slowed. Pirates fell under coordinated fire, their advance stalling. But in the smoke and chaos, a deep voice boomed across the plaza. Captain Korvac emerged, towering above his men, clad in piecemeal armor stitched together from battlefields past. His tusked mouth curled into a sneer as his gaze locked on Elias. "I know that bird," Korvac growled, pointing to the faint ink visible at the edge of Elias's sleeve. "Falcon Unit. I thought you were all dead." His laugh was a guttural roar, carrying across the square. "I killed 2 of you myself at Jexa Ridge. Now fate delivers another to me." The words struck like a blade, twisting in old scars. Elias remembered the ridge, the inferno of battle, the screams of men cut down beside him. He had believed Korvac long dead, yet here he stood, grinning through blood and fire. Kale's men faltered at the revelation, their eyes flicking to Elias with a new recognition. The mechanic they had known was no ordinary exile. He was one of the fabled Falcons, a warrior whose legend still whispered through veterans' tales. Elias clenched his jaw, forcing his focus to the present. "We hold the line," he said, stepping forward. His stance alone steadied the soldiers. Korvac raised his massive rifle, energy coils glowing. "Come then, Ghost. Show me the claws of your falcon before I tear them off." The plaza erupted again in fire and fury. Soldiers fell, pirates advanced, and Elias led the counter, his every movement honed by years of combat. He ducked beneath arcs of plasma, returned fire with precision, and used the terrain as though the station itself bent to his will. Kale watched him, awe hidden beneath his stern expression. This was the truth of the man, no simple mechanic, but a survivor of humanity's fiercest warriors. Still, the pirates pressed harder, and Elias knew the battle was far from finished. Korvac's laughter echoed over the gunfire, a promise of blood yet to come. The fight was only beginning, and the Falcon Emblem, once buried in dust and silence, had drawn its enemies back into the light. "You said." The plaza lay in ruin, scorched metal and shattered stones smoking beneath the glow of emergency lights. Captain Korvac advanced through the haze like some nightmare-given flesh, his armored bulk dwarfing the men around him. Each step rattled the deck plates, and his guttural laugh carried the certainty of a predator closing on its prey. Elias Kane stood at the center of the square, a scavenged rifle balanced in his grip, his stance calm though his pulse hammered with the weight of inevitability. The pirates fanned out behind their captain, confidence swelling at the sight of their leader unchallenged. Admiral Kale Vaynar barked orders, rallying what remained of his soldiers, but he knew their defense was crumbling. Weapons overheated, shields drained, and the enemy pressed harder with every passing breath. Elias raised a hand, signaling for silence, and for a moment the battlefield stilled as both sides sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. "You shouldn't have lived," Korvac snarled, leveling his rifle. "The Falcons died on Jexa Ridge. I saw them fall. I buried them in fire." Elias's voice was steady, though the memories Korvac invoked clawed at the edges of his mind. "You buried the weak. The strong survived." The words struck like a gauntlet thrown, and Korvac roared, unleashing a barrage of fire. Elias moved with the precision of instinct, diving behind cover, returning shots that forced the pirate line to stagger. His rifle barked in controlled bursts, each round finding its mark. Yet Korvac pressed forward relentlessly, shrugging off glancing strikes, his armor thick and battle-scarred. The duel spiraled through the plaza, every clash of fire illuminating the emblem inked into Elias's arm as his sleeve tore. The falcon spread its wings across scarred flesh, and in that moment the colonists hiding in doorways saw more than a man. They saw a symbol. Soldiers who had faltered rose again, their courage rekindled. They shouted as one, driving the pirates back with renewed ferocity. The falcon had returned, and its cry echoed in their blood. Korvac bellowed in fury, closing the distance, his massive frame crashing through cover. He swung the butt of his rifle like a club, and Elias barely ducked in time, the blow smashing stone to shards. Elias countered with a knife drawn from his belt, striking at the gaps in Korvac's armor. Sparks flared, but the captain's strength was monstrous, each strike shaking Elias to the bone. Admiral Kale saw the tide shift around them. The pirates, though fierce, faltered as their leader was challenged. He pressed his men harder, forming a wall that kept the raiders from overwhelming Elias. The battle narrowed to its center, where the mechanic and the mercenary clashed like forces of nature. At last, Elias feigned a stumble, drawing Korvac in. The pirate lunged, overextending, and in that instant Elias drove his blade deep into the joint of the warlord's armor. Korvac howled, staggering, and Elias seized the stolen rifle from his grip. With a single, precise shot, he shattered the power pack on Korvac's chest plate, the explosion throwing the captain to the ground. Smoke and silence followed, broken only by Korvac's ragged breath as his men scattered in panic. Their will had broken with their leader. But the fight was not yet over. The pirate warship loomed outside the station, its cannons charging to obliterate the colony even in defeat. Elias wiped blood from his brow and looked to Kale. "Hold the line. I'll finish it." Before the Admiral could object, Elias was already moving, commandeering a fallen skimmer and guiding it toward the docking tubes. He boarded the pirate vessel with the ease of a man slipping back into old instincts, moving through its corridors like a shadow. Every enemy he faced fell quickly, silenced before they could raise alarms. He reached the engine core, its systems thrumming with volatile energy. With deft hands he set the overload sequence, knowing the risk, knowing escape might not come. The ship shuddered as alarms blared, and Elias sprinted for the hangar bay, flames chasing him through the corridors. He leapt into an escape pod as the core erupted, the explosion tearing the warship apart in a blossom of fire visible across the void. The shockwave rattled Vera Station, but the people cheered, their fear drowned by triumph. When the pod docked, soldiers and civilians alike gathered in the hangar. Elias emerged battered but unbowed, the Falcon emblem exposed on his arm for all to see. The cheer that rose shook the station, a sound of relief, gratitude, and something more, a rallying cry. Admiral Kale stepped forward, his expression grave, but his eyes alight with respect. "You saved them," Kale said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "But you cannot pretend to be only a mechanic any longer. The galaxy needs men who can teach, who can lead, who can remind us that even in the darkest hours, the Falcon still flies. Elias met his gaze, weary yet resolute. I didn't fight for glory. I fought so they'd live another day. Then fight for that, Kale replied. Not as a soldier bound by the past, but as a guide for the future. The silence that followed was heavy, the decision pressing on Elias like the weight of all the graves behind him. Slowly, he nodded, not in surrender but in acceptance. The Falcons were gone, but their spirit need not die with them. From the crowd, Lyri stepped forward, clutching her toy robot, its chest still marked with the Falcon he had etched. She held it up proudly, eyes shining. Elias knelt to meet her gaze, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself the faintest smile. The emblem was no longer a relic of loss. It was a promise. And though the war was far from over, Elias Kane rose with the certainty that the Falcon's shadow would once again stretch across the stars. You said,